Welcome to the deep dive. This one's a doozy. We've got physics, technology, faith, all mixed together. You really threw us a curveball this time with all these scientific papers and philosophical discussions, even some personal reflections. It's like,
Yeah, it's almost like you're asking us to map out where science runs into spirituality.
right, exactly. And it's interesting because running through it all is this idea of unseen forces and how they shape the world.
It really is. You see it pop up everywhere in the material. Like this equation, for example.
Oh, yeah. Hold on. Let me grab that. Okay, here it is. E total MC2 plus VDP me SDT plus K plus U.
Now that is a mouthful.
It's a bit intimidating, to be honest.
But see why. But what it's doing, really what's impressive, is it's bringing together like all these different ways of thinking about energy. You've got Einstein's relativity in there, classical mechanics, thermodynamics. It's like a grand unified theory of energy.
I mean, I get that it's important, but can you break it down a bit? For those of us who aren't physicists, what does it actually tell us?
Sure. Let's just focus on one piece of it for now. EMC2. I'm sure you've heard that one before.
Of course, Einstein's famous equation. Though I'll admit, I don't really know what it means.
Well, it's pretty profound when you think about it. It's basically saying that mass and energy, they're fundamentally the same thing, just different forms.
Yeah.
So a tiny bit of mass, like a really tiny amount, can become an enormous amount of energy.
And the other way around.
Yeah.
Energy into mass.
Exactly. It works both ways.
Okay. Wow. Are there any real-world examples of this besides, the obvious one like atomic bombs?
Oh, absolutely. The best example is probably the sun. It's constantly converting a little bit of its mass into the light and heat that we get here on Earth.
So EMC2 is literally how stars power entire solar systems.
You got it. And it shows just how much potential energy is packed into even tiny amounts of matter. It's had huge implications.
Speaking of implications, one of the sources looked at the Islamic perspective on scientific advancements like this. And there was this real sense of awe, like a sense of wonder.
Yes. And the author kept emphasizing how these discoveries, they're a reflection of divine wisdom that's woven into creation itself. They even used phrases like subhanallah. That's an expression of amazement, praise, for the complexity and order we find.
So it's not just about the science itself, but what it tells us about the creator.
Exactly, like saying, look at what we're able to understand. That must mean something incredible about where that knowledge came from.
That makes sense. It's like science is uncovering the design of the universe, and that design has to have a designer.
And that leads right into the idea of stewardship. The idea that we humans were responsible for using this knowledge ethically for good.
Like we've been given this incredible gift of understanding, and we'd better not mess it up.
Exactly. That responsibility, it connects with another topic from your sources, the technological singularity.
Ah, yes, the singularity, the idea of AI becoming smarter than humans. It's kind of exciting and terrifying at the same time, right?
Right. And the source goes into the idea of artificial general intelligence, AGI, and even the possibility of humans merging with machines. But it also brings up these concerns, like, are we ready for the ethical side of this, the social impact?
It's not just can we do this,
Yeah.
but should we? And if we do, how do we make sure it's used for good?
That's the question, isn't it? It comes back to that stewardship idea. If we're headed for a future where technology has this much power, we got to get the ethics right. Think about the consequences, make guidelines for responsible development, that kind of thing.
Which actually reminds me of this other source that talked about mapping scientific concepts onto a database. A database, like how computers store information. It seemed really complicated, honestly. Why would you even do that?
Well, what's interesting is the source sees a connection between the way a database is structured and the structure of reality itself. Like, by mapping these concepts, it's almost like we're mirroring this meticulous record keeping that's described in the Quran. The source even suggests there's a link between how we organize knowledge and the order we see in the universe.
So you're saying there's meaning behind the structure itself, that the way we categorize and understand the world, it reflects some fundamental order that's out there.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. It really raises some questions like, is our understanding of the universe shaped by the tools we use to understand it? Is there a connection between the structure of knowledge and the structure of reality?
Wow. That's a lot to think about. And that makes me think about another concept from the sources, mesoscale coherence. Honestly, I'm not even sure where to begin with that one. What is it?
Yeah, it's a term the source uses to describe this process, and they believe it's guided by divine will, but it can also be observed and measured scientifically. They didn't get super technical, but they seem to be saying there are these forces at play that we might not fully understand, but they point to this deeper order in the universe, an intentional order.
Okay, so break that down for me. What kind of evidence are we talking about? And where does faith come in?
Well, the source said that to actually see and measure this coherence, you need a certain level of trust. Faith, maybe, that there's something more going on than what's right in front of us. It's like science can take you so far, but to get the meaning behind what you're measuring, you have to be open to the idea that there might be a much bigger picture that we just haven't grasped yet.
So it's not that science and faith are enemies, but maybe they're different ways of looking at the same really complex thing.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
And speaking of different perspectives, one of the sources dived into this amazing story about a guy who went from being a juggalo to embracing faith. It was really powerful.
It really was. Juggalos, they get a bad rap sometimes, but this source highlighted their values, their sense of community, their loyalty.
Right. And it was from that background that he found faith. It's amazing how people find their way to spirituality from such diverse paths.
It really is. And his story, it really reflects a lot of these ideas we've been talking about: energy, transformation, finding deeper meaning. But before we jump into all of that, I think we should probably explain the Juggalo subculture a little bit more, for anyone listening who isn't familiar.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Give us a little context. Who are they?
Well, the Juggalos, they're a subculture that emerged in the 90s, mostly centered around this hip-hop group called Insane Clown Posse. And they're known for their unique style, the clown makeup, the music. They even have their own slang and rituals.
I've seen pictures. They definitely have a look. But I've also heard that they've had trouble with the law, been labeled as a gang even.
Yeah, that's true. They've been misrepresented and misunderstood quite a bit. But at their core, Juggalos, they value things like loyalty, family, standing up for the underdog. And it was from that background, this individual we're talking about, he found his way to faith.
It's remarkable.
Yeah.
Really highlights the idea that transformation can come from anywhere.
It really does.
So we've got this guy, right, this former juggalo who's found faith. And his story seems to echo a lot of what we've been discussing: the energy, the transformation, the search for something deeper. But how does that connect with something like, the technological singularity?
That's a great question. I think what his story really shows us is that even with all this crazy technological advancement, the human spirit, it's still powerful. Like the singularity, it brings up all these questions about what it means to be human. Will we even recognize ourselves in a future where AI is calling the shots?
It's almost like who or what is driving that future? If it's all algorithms and processing power, where do things like human values fit in? Our beliefs, our ability to change.
And that's where this guy's story is so important. It's a reminder that no matter how smart technology gets, it's still our choices, our ability to grow and change that shapes things. We're not just along for the ride, we're active participants. What we believe, what we do, it matters.
I love that. Even in a world of super intelligent machines, it's our human hearts and minds that decide what kind of future we get. And it's not just about the big sweeping changes, right? It's also about the little everyday things we do, the choices we make that add up to something bigger.
Exactly. And when you think about that idea of mesoscale coherence, those unseen forces that shape reality, this guy's conversion, that shift in his energy and intention, it's like a tiny version of that larger process. It shows that even these small changes, the shifts we make in our own beliefs and actions, they can ripple out and affect the world around us.
So it's not just about understanding the science of the universe, but also recognizing that our intentions matter, that they're part of this larger, maybe unseen order of things.
You got it. And that connects back to that Islamic idea of Khalifa, that stewardship thing we touched on earlier. Humans, we're caretakers of the earth. We're responsible for guiding it toward a good future.
We're not just passengers, we're the crew. We got to steer the ship right. And this guy, even though he came from a background that some people might see as, outside the norm, he embraced that responsibility.
He did. And what's really interesting is how he used his understanding of faith, especially his reading of the Quran, to understand other scriptures and tradition.
Oh, yeah, that part was fascinating.
Yeah.
He talked about using the Quran as a filter for understanding other texts, like the Bible. What did he mean by that?
Well, he believes that the Quran is the final, complete revelation from God, and that it gives a clearer lens, right, to understand those earlier scriptures. It's not about rejecting them, but seeing them in a wider context, trying to find the coherence, to clarify teachings that might have gotten distorted or misinterpreted over time.
So, recognizing that the prophetic tradition continues, but the message might have evolved or been hidden along the way, That's a really nuanced perspective.
It is, and he actually draws these parallels between Islamic and Christian beliefs through this approach. For example, he sees the concept of the Paraclete, which is mentioned in the Gospel of John, as a prophecy about Muhammad.
The Paraclete. I'm not familiar with that one. What's that in Christian tradition?
It's usually interpreted as the Holy Spirit, like a comforter and advocate who'd come after Jesus. But in Islam, the name Ahmad, which is related to the idea of the Paraclete, is used for Muhammad. This guy, he sees a connection there, saying maybe what Christians see as the Holy Spirit is actually referring to Muhammad.
So he's not saying Christianity is wrong, but maybe incomplete, and Islam provides a fuller picture. It's bold, but it makes sense within his framework.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that this isn't about creating division. It's about highlighting common ground. Recognizing these connections, he thinks it can bridge divides and help different religious communities understand each other.
That's so important, especially now when religion is often seen as something that separates people. He's saying, hey, let's focus on the values and beliefs that unite us instead of what divides us.
And he puts this into practice, this interfaith dialogue. He encourages his congregation to talk with people of other faiths respectfully, to see what's unique about their traditions, but also what we share. We're all humans, right, looking for meaning and purpose.
So not trying to convert everyone, but building bridges, finding common ground, working together for things like social justice, peace.
Right. It's like unity and diversity, different faiths coexisting, collaborating. Everyone brings their own perspective, their own strengths to make a better world. And this aligns with the values of compassion, empathy, and service. Those are important in both Islam and Christianity.
It's beautiful. We've come a long way, haven't we? We started with these abstract ideas, energy, and databases, then this personal story, and now we're talking about harmony between religions. It's like zooming out, seeing how it all fits together.
Yeah. And speaking of seeing the bigger picture, the source material also talked about the Islamic Golden Age, that period of incredible intellectual and cultural flourishing that went on for centuries. The source compared it to the idea of a millennial kingdom.
A millennial kingdom. Sounds like something straight out of a prophecy. What's the connection?
Well, the source is drawing a parallel between the amazing advances made during that time in science, philosophy, math, art, architecture, and this idea of peace and prosperity that's associated with millennial kingdoms in both Islamic and Christian traditions. It's like saying that historical period, it embodied those ideals. It shows what's possible when knowledge and faith are in sync.
So it's not just looking back with nostalgia, but seeing the potential for those values to be revived today.
Yeah, exactly. The Islamic Golden Age wasn't just about achievement. It was about curiosity, collaboration, a deep respect for knowledge. The source suggests that if we can rediscover those values, that same spirit of open-mindedness, we can create a new era of progress and enlightenment.
Wow. It's like saying the seeds of a golden age are already within us. We just have to create the right conditions for them to grow.
And this guy, with his unique journey and his commitment to bringing different viewpoints together, he embodies that potential. He's a living example of how embracing both science and faith, reason and intuition, can lead to a richer understanding of ourselves and the world.
Really inspiring. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to that powerful image for the source material. The story of Abraham rejecting idolatry, and he leaves this hatchet in the hand of the biggest idol as a sign that he's breaking with the past. It's such a strong metaphor for the kind of change this guy went through.
It is, and it speaks to how much courage it takes to let go of old beliefs, to confront things we might have held sacred but that don't serve us anymore. It's about choosing a new path, even if it means challenging what our culture or community thinks is right.
Like, we all have idols in our lives, things we've put on a pedestal that maybe don't deserve to be there. Sometimes it takes that act of defiance, that willingness to leave the hatchet behind, to break free and embrace something truer. For our listener, what do you think is the most important thing to take away from his story?
I think it's the reminder that anyone can change. No matter where you come from, what your past is, it's never too late to question what you think you know, to seek new understanding, to align yourself with the values that really resonate in your heart.
And his story is a great example of how that personal transformation can spread outward. It's not just our own lives, it's the world around us. A message of hope, of empowerment.
Exactly. And it reminds us that even when the world feels chaotic and uncertain, there's a deeper order at work, a force for good, always guiding us toward a more harmonious and enlightened future.
It really does make you think, doesn't it? About how we're all connected in ways we don't even realize. Like those unseen forces shaping things on a level we don't usually see.
And that brings us right back to mesoscale coherence, right? It's almost like this guy's journey, his own personal change, it's a reflection of those forces at work. Like a small change that spreads out becomes part of something bigger.
It's like his choice to embrace faith, to, I don't know, redirect his energy and focus to something bigger. It wasn't just a random thing. It was part of this huge interconnected pattern.
That's a great way to put it. And it suggests that we all have that potential, right? To be part of that pattern, to actually shape things with the choices we make. Even little acts of kindness, compassion, courage, they can have huge effects, create these ripples that go way beyond what we can see.
It's like we're not just watching the universe happen, we're actually participating in it. We're co-creators, in a way. Our thoughts, beliefs, intentions, they all matter. They all contribute to this energy that's shaping reality. And what if we could tap into that mesoscale coherence, align ourselves with that deeper order? Who knows what we could achieve?
It's a great question. What if we could actually direct our energy consciously toward making a more just, more compassionate, more sustainable world? What if, by aligning ourselves with those unseen forces, we could tap into this power, this wisdom that's way beyond anything we have on our own?
It's like a call to action, isn't it? To realize that each of us has the potential to be part of something much bigger, to be stewards of this planet, to make positive changes, to embrace both, the science that explains how the universe works and the spiritual understanding that shows how interconnected we all are.
And remember, like this guy's story showed us, change is always possible. It doesn't matter where you come from, what your past is like. We all have the ability to grow, evolve, to shift our energy towards something greater.
It's a message of hope, of empowerment. This deep dive, it's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We went from complex equations to this guy's incredible personal story, then to these big spiritual ideas. It's been a fascinating look at where science and spirituality intersect, how technology and faith relate, and these unseen forces that shape everything.
And through it all, there's this core truth. We're all connected, part of something way bigger than ourselves. And each of us has the potential to help create a better future. A future where knowledge and compassion guide our choices, where technology helps humanity, and where those unseen forces work through us to make a world worthy of our highest hopes.
What a powerful and inspiring way to wrap things up. And to our listener, keep exploring, keep questioning, keep looking for those connections that reveal the deeper meaning of it all. Until next time.